morning and welcome to Tamimi Studio. I am Ahmad Saleh, partner and head of innovation and patents at Al Tamimi and Company law firm. This morning, we will be discussing innovation and patents with a very special guest, Mr. David Martin, coming from one of the leading institutions in the world in terms of scientific research and innovation, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. Welcome, Mr. David.
Thank you very much.
So, David, as you may know, the UAE has been focusing on diversifying its economy and walking away from an economy essentially based on oil and gas and diversifying it to include innovation and knowledge. And other countries in the GCC region are adopting a similar strategy. In the recent years, we've seen a lot of very ambitious visions, innovation strategies, and actions being taken by the governments in the UAE and in the GCC region in general in order to advance the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem inside the region. So with all of these changes going on, we know that innovation cannot happen without the collaboration between parties and between nations, without the collaboration between entities inside the region here and external entities in major innovation ecosystems in the world, including MIT. In this respect, it's great to have you here today, David, to learn a little bit more from you about the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem at MIT and how can entities in the GCC region here work with the MIT innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem.
Yes, I'm a program director, and I work in the Office of Corporate Relations at MIT, which has two primary programs, an industrial liaison program and a startup exchange. The industrial liaison portion works with approximately 236 international companies, Fortune 1000 level companies, that are interested in engaging with MIT broadly or deeply. We act as basically a facilitator or a catalyst to help them navigate the complexities of the university. University has a mission to focus on research and teaching, and companies have an interest in being able to work with that. And we make it easier for both sides to do that. Personal assistance in understanding the needs of the companies and thereby, reaching out, making introductions to them within that system to facilitate mutually beneficial collaborations of various different kinds, as well as just passing information among that ecosystem to make it stronger.
Speaking about the innovation ecosystem at MIT, David, and we know it's a pretty sophisticated one, can you give us an idea about this sophisticated, complex, comprehensive innovation ecosystem?
Yes, it is pretty complex, and it is unique to the area, but that's true no matter what area you're in. MIT sits in Kendall Square in Cambridge, which has been called the most innovative square mile on the planet. But it consists of MIT as a core anchor in that particular environment, but it also consists of the startups that have spun out of both MIT and other universities, large companies that have put offices in that particular labs in that particular area to facilitate collaboration and recruiting, as well as venture capital and accelerators and connectors. And MIT has created a series of different entrepreneurship generating engines to try to help feed that ecosystem as they realize that it exists and the way it exists today.
Sure. Can you, I know that in MIT there are some notable labs in MIT, research labs, which collaborate as well with external entities. Can you give us an idea about some of the notable labs at MIT?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, the list is huge, but a few of the more recent ones or the more established ones are the MIT Energy Initiative was begun some years ago by large oil companies, really, and it has focused a significant amount of research over time, initially in the oil and gas industry, and then renewable energies, and now significant amount of work being done on sustainability. They've just created the Future Energy Systems Center, which is bringing a lot of that together, which includes things like fusion energy. But even more interesting, there's the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, CSAIL. The .Nano Lab was created about 2 years ago, which is a unique research facility that's usable by everybody on campus, but also by corporations that want to come in and leverage the machinery that's in there that allows investigation and engineering at the nano level. Most recently, the Schwarzman College of Computing was created about a year ago, and it is actually taking computing as a discipline and applying it across the other colleges at MIT. First new school created in a number of years. And a key part of that is something called the Quest for Intelligence, which was a multidisciplinary science and engineering effort to basically reverse engineer artificial intelligence and create engineering tools that can be used to solve other problems.
Sure. So these labs, if I understand well, they collaborate with external entities. And can you give us an idea about the types of collaborations? Is it kind of research collaborations where industry players, for example, having some practical business challenges, come often to these labs to fund the research to help them find solutions to these challenges? Is it the type of collaboration normally happening?
To be honest, there's a full range of types of collaboration that happen. In the case of these particular kinds of organizations, they all have some form of a consortium that companies that are interested in that area. Those are more general type things in a sense of you pay a contribution to that, which they use to fund the research, but then you participate with them in determining what research areas get funded, and you get access to those results yourself as part of that particular consortium. But there are other ways to work with MIT. I mean, you can also directly work with one of the researchers that are working in that center and do a collaborative research project with them that's just for you, and it's not part of the larger consortium. So you have those options as well.
Thanks, David. We know that innovation and patents are interrelated in a way, and we know that MIT puts a lot of emphasis on patents and intellectual property. How do you see the relationship between patents and innovation, and how does MIT approach or addresses the question of patents and intellectual property when it comes to the protection of its own innovations?
Couple of questions in there, but for the first one, MIT I think generates more patents than any individual university in the world. The one exception is the university system in California, which has a number of different universities that are contributing to their patents supplied each year. Patents absolutely are an important part of innovation. It's hard the magic happens when the innovative idea is put into motion. What's critical about that is if you don't patent it early, then when you get to the important part where you really need the patent, which is where you're scaling up and you're going to draw attention to yourself, it's not there. So that's critical. So it's not just a marker of success, it's also a very important part that's going to be necessary when you're really going to scale a solution. So MIT very strongly believes in that. From what happens when you sponsor research protection or a perspective, MIT will own the patent. That's that way that they basically go. But whenever you set up an agreement, you negotiate the terms of that to ensure that the company sponsoring the research, the areas of concern are protected. And so the fact that we have the largest contribution of industry funding research at MIT is testament to the fact that that's very successful. And our TLO knows that you don't make solutions happen if you set up terms that don't make any sense. So that's not an issue and doesn't tend to be once the industrial partners get to talk to the licensing office. The other part, though, that's important is that a lot of the research that's done at MIT is really early stage, pre-competitive, and risky. And so generally, large companies don't license technology, for example, or go to the TLO and license something out. They don't necessarily do that. That tends to happen more with startups and spin-outs. Sometimes companies will help make that happen through a separate startup or spin-out that they'll set up a joint venture with or something. The idea being is that it's much more effective from a business perspective to have the startup do the marketing de-risking and the technology de-risking because that removes that risk from the company, and yet the company can still set up a much wider arrangement of business deals with with such an entity.
Speaking about, again, intellectual property and patents, each academic institution has its own IP policy. And I think you touched base a little bit on that in your previous response. However, can you elaborate a little bit more about the rationale? I think you mentioned that the policy of MIT is to own the patents, even if it's in the frame of collaboration between MIT and an external entity, and even if the research is being funded by an external entity.
Right.
Can you elaborate a little bit about the rationale behind this IP policy?
Absolutely. There's really two primary drivers behind that rationale. The first being to ensure that the inventors get the appropriate credit. That actually creates incentive to patent the ideas. People won't be afraid to patent the ideas. And that's important to be able to stoke the innovation. The other half is to ensure that the innovation gets applied. That's a very, very strong incentive. Again, it goes back to a point I made earlier, and that is that MIT wants to create solutions that make a difference. And if you create an idea and then you lock it up in a patent safe somewhere and don't do anything with it, then you're not solving any problems, you're not making an impact. So they want to ensure with their intellectual property arrangements that happens. Now, if the original sponsor has every intention of taking that idea and, we're going to go put it into motion first, that's not going to be a problem. It's only if a company tries to say, I'm going to lock it up and put it away, I want to put so many restrictions on that nobody else on the planet can use it, then the TLO is going to say that's not the whole reason we created this. But again, this gets discussed prior to the signing of any agreement, prior to the beginning of any research. So whatever the terms and conditions are negotiable and always designed, again, to get that idea out into the real world.
Sure. Speaking about collaboration, speaking about working together between entities in the GCC region and the wider MENA region and MIT. So as the innovation ecosystem is advancing in our region here, and as I mentioned earlier in my introduction, a lot of emphasis has been put by the governments here to advance the innovation ecosystem and encouraging entities inside the region to work with the remaining of the world, and particularly the innovation ecosystems across the world. How do you see this happening between entities in the MENA region and MIT? And what are your recommendations to these entities who wish to start collaborating with the MIT ecosystem, innovation and entrepreneurship wise?
Very good. The whole purpose of the Industrial Liaison Program is to try to engage industrial partners worldwide. Of the approximately 236 members we currently have, 2/3 are outside of the United States. The MENA region is no stranger to MIT. We've worked here in a number of different ways, particularly with assisting establishing the Masdar Institute, which is now part of Khalifa University. And there are a number of companies that have been members or are members of the ILP right now, from UAE, from Saudi Arabia, from other parts of the region. The distance actually is even less of a problem now, post-pandemic, because we've continued to work with our partners here in the UAE throughout, and now have increased our capabilities of being able to make those connections virtually and provide even more ways to interact. But that's why ILP was created to begin with, was to find companies that are interested and in participating with MIT, either widely or deeply, and we facilitate those types of things. And to be honest, the incentive from a collaboration perspective works both ways. There's a lot of innovation going on in UAE. A lot of the startups are probably interested, for example, in working with companies in the UAE, because there seems to be a higher interest in more innovation and a higher risk willingness in order to find the really good ideas that work, and that's a strong incentive to work together. So again, the building of the innovation ecosystem works both ways.
From your experience, David, working with entities here in the GCC region, where do you see the primary interest is in terms of industry? Is it on the in healthcare? Is it in education? Is it in the ICT sector? Is there a trend you've been noticing in terms of interest by the MENA entities or the GCC entities in particular?
In particular, to be honest, almost the same interest that we see worldwide, with the biggest interest right now, sustainability. Different ways to look at every company's processes, supply chain, future, and assist in defining what sustainability means to them, which is different for every company. The technology solutions to that type of thing, again, spanned just about everything that's going on. But that really is the biggest emphasis of all companies, and certainly right now the companies that we're working with in this area have the same interests.
Thank you, David, for joining us at the Mimi Studio today. It was a great pleasure of having you and having this very interesting discussion. And we really look very forward to welcoming you on an ongoing basis, hopefully, in our Al Tamimi company and our Tamimi Studio. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciated being here.